You finally found the tool that makes the financials easy to explain. The dashboard is clean. It looks solid. This is the meeting you walked into feeling ready. Then comes the question, how does the loan actually get paid down? That's the moment you realize your new dashboard was almost helpful.
Hey, it's Cashflow Mike, and welcome back to another episode of the Clear Path to Cash podcast. And this week we're going to tackle what happens when you actually fix the gap. So I was talking to one of our members just a while back, and he said something that probably sounds familiar to a lot of advisors. Here's what he told me. He says, I feel like my meetings are going well, but I don't know if anything's changing. That caught my attention, mainly because he wasn't complaining about the client. He liked the client. The client trusted him. The meetings were productive while they were happening. The problem showed up afterwards, right? A few weeks would go by and the same issue would come back into the conversation and the client would still be worried about cash. The advisor would explain what was happening once again. Everybody would agree that something needed to change and then the meeting would end. So I asked him, what usually happened between meetings? What's going on between that time you meet and the time you meet again? He just laughed a little and says, well, probably not enough. Well, that's the part that's worth studying. So we pulled up the client inside the Clear Path to Cash app and started looking at the situation differently. The client kept saying that it was a cash problem, but when we worked through the numbers, inventory started to stand out. It had been that way and building that way for about months, but because sales were still decent, nobody really treated it like it was a real source of pressure. And once that became visible, that whole conversation changed. The advisor didn't have to keep talking about cash in general terms. He could point to the place where the cash was getting tied up and show the client why it mattered. So then we moved right into the action center. This is what happens between the meetings, right? That's where the meeting stopped being just another conversation and started to become the actual plan. The advisor created one specific action tied to the inventory issue, and the client knew who owned it and knew what needed to happen next and how they were going to be measured during the process. So that next meeting felt a whole lot different, right? Because the client wasn't asking that same old question about where the cash went. They were talking about what had changed since the last conversation. And that's what happens when you actually fix the gap. And the gap I'm talking about there is the gap between, hey, we're going to go do this, and hey, what did you do about it? Right? The value doesn't come from just making a report either. It has to come from helping the client leave the meeting with something they can actually do. It's that homework and not overwhelm them. 2, 3, maybe 4 little things they could do and get wins between today and the next time you meet. And that's what the Clear Path to Cash was built to support. If this sounds like the type of gap that you see in your own advisory meetings, hey, spend a few minutes in this demo and don't just look at the tools and click on everything. Watch how the system moves a client through situation into action, finding the burning issue, identifying what causes it to burn, and then executing at the flashpoint, right? The thing that you have to do to actually put the fire out. Because that moment, we know it. And the Clear Path to Cash was built for that moment.
The numbers are right. Everything reconciled. Nothing is missing. There's more data than ever, and less room to think. So what do we actually do next? That's the moment you realize the math was almost helpful.